Welcome to Project Blackwood.
You know, it sounds like a redaction, like something you'd find heavily blacked out in some classified file.
It really does, and in a way that is exactly what we are unearthing today. We're opening a file on an entity that is arguably the absolute backbone of Western security. But to really grasp what it is today, we have to start with a contrast that is so violent it almost doesn't make sense.
Violent is definitely the right word, because we aren't just tracing a typical corporate growth curve here. We're looking at a complete fundamental mutation.
Right, so I want you to picture the early days, then. We are in San Francisco. The year is 1912. It's a garage.
Probably smells like sawdust and gasoline.
Exactly. Sweat, oil, wood. Inside there's a mechanic named Alan. He's wrestling with this incredibly fragile contraption made of wood and fabric, and he swears this thing is going to fly off the water.
This is Alan Lockheed.
Alan Lockheed. And spoiler alert for anyone digging into the history of that little wood and fabric experiment, the Alco Hydro Aeroplane Company, it fails.
It doesn't just stumble. It completely liquidates.
Right. It hits absolute zero in 1921.
And we really need to note why it hit zero. It wasn't because the plane didn't fly. It flew fine. It was because peace broke out.
World War I ended.
Exactly. The market was suddenly flooded with cheap, surplus military planes. Nobody wanted to buy a brand new, expensive one from some mechanic in a garage.
So the entity dies. It goes to zero. Now, I want you to hold that image of the bankrupt garage in your mind, because we have to pull up the now.
The 2026 profile.
Yes. Let's fast forward to the fiscal close of 2025. We're looking at the exact same genetic entity, but the garage is gone. We're looking at a global hegemon.
The numbers in this filing they're frankly hard to wrap your head around.
I was just looking at the 2025 close.
Yeah.
Revenue is $75.05 billion.
That's just one single year.
Just 1 year. And the stock price hits an all-time high in early 2026 of $666.51. But here is the number that really stopped me cold. Look at the backlog.
$194 billion.
A backlog of orders totaling $194 billion.
That is the critical metric right there.
Yeah.
That is nearly $200 billion of future money that is essentially locked in. It's not a projection. It's a sovereign guarantee.
So on the surface, this looks like the ultimate American success story, from a bankrupt garage to this global titan. But when you start digging into these documents, when you really start peeling back the layers, you find this massive mystery.
The complete inversion of their identity.
Yes, because if you look at that early era, Alan Lockheed and his team, they were desperate to sell to people.
To civilians? Sightseers?
Right. They were pitching airlines like Pan Am. They desperately wanted to be a commercial company.
And today, look at the metric we pull in defense purity.
It's 96%.
96%. That means for every single dollar they bring in, 96 cents comes directly from defense contracting. They effectively stop selling to people.
They don't sell to you, they don't sell to me, they don't sell to United Airlines.
They exist almost exclusively to sell to the state. They have become what economists call a monopsony contractor.
The monopsony, that's the inverse of a monopoly, right?
Right. A monopoly is one seller and many buyers. A monopsony is many sellers, but only one buyer that actually matters.
The United States government.
Exactly.
So this is the central mystery we are investigating today. How does a company go from building sightseeing planes in a garage, literally begging tourists for ticket sales, to becoming this impenetrable fortress where the only customer is the Pentagon?
And the hint is buried in these financial files. Because this wasn't just natural growth. It wasn't just them getting bigger and better. It was a survival reflex.
Well, very reflex.
Yeah. There is a specific moment, a specific crime scene in 1971 that we are going to unpack. It was a near-death experience that was so terrifying, so deeply traumatic for the company, that it scared them out of the free market forever.
It drove them right into the arms of the state. Okay, let's trace this back. We need to start at the beginning to really understand the DNA. I'm looking at the early incorporation documents, and I kept getting tripped up on the name. It's spelled Loughhead.
Which everyone in the 1920s pronounced loghead.
Which is just unfortunate. I'm buying a high-tech flying machine from a loghead. It doesn't exactly scream engineering brilliance.
It really doesn't. And this actually matters, because if you look at the margin notes on the 1926 incorporation, you see this deliberate pivot. Alan Lockheed changes the spelling to Lockheed, Lockheed.
Was that just to fix the pronunciation?
Partially, but it was also about borrowing credibility. His brother Malcolm had already started a hydraulic brake company in Detroit using that phonetic spelling, Lockheed, and it was highly successful.
So from day one, there is this obsession with
With
perception.
brand authority, Allen didn't want to be the grease-stained mechanic in the garage anymore. He wanted to be an institution.
But despite the name change, looking at their actual behavior in the 20s and 30s, they were complete cowboys. They were massive risk takers.
Total risk takers. Look at the engineering spirit of that era. They built the Model G tractor design. They built the F-1 seaplane, which was the world's largest at the time.
And they were primarily using it for sightseeing.
That's the key context. They were completely exposed to the market. They needed individual people to walk up, open their wallets, and buy tickets.
They needed commercial airlines to buy fleets.
Right. If the economy tanked, they tanked. They were living and dying by the whims of the free market.
And then comes the first real taste of the drug. I'm looking at March 1938.
This is a critical data point.
The world is getting dark, Hitler is on the move, and the British Royal Air Force comes knocking. They are desperate. They need a reconnaissance bomber.
And look at the timeline they gave the engineers.
5 days.
5 days.
5 days to design a bomber. I mean, today it takes 5 days just to get the Outlook invite approved for the kickoff meeting. It's absurd. Now, to be fair, they were modifying an existing civilian plane, the Model 14 Super Electra, but they still had to militarize it, prove the aerodynamics worked, and generate all the engineering drawings in 5 days.
And they did it. They delivered the design for the Hudson, and the British bought it.
And look at the payout.
A $25 million contract.
In 1938 money.
That has to be hundreds of millions today.
Seriously. It was the largest military contract awarded prior to World War II for them. And this is the exact moment the revenue stream shifts. Suddenly, they aren't worried about selling individual $10 tickets to sightseers in Santa Barbara.
They are selling security to a sovereign nation.
It changes your entire corporate metabolism. It changes how you hire, how you plan your supply chain, how you view risk. It's the very first step away from the commercial hustle and toward the state guarantee.
It really is a drug. Because once you clear a $25 million check from a government, chasing individual passengers just seems incredibly tedious.
But speaking of risk and speed, we have to pull up the June 1943 dossier, because you can't investigate this entity without talking about the anomaly, the secret division.
The Skunk Works.
Right. If you're an aviation nerd, this is holy ground. But looking at the actual files, the origins are almost comical. Why Skunk Works?
It's a really strange cultural oddity. It was named after a moonshine factory in the Lil Abner comic strip, the Skunk Oil Factory.
So the most advanced aerospace division in human history, the place that essentially built the future, is named after a cartoon moonshine still.
It perfectly fits the vibe they had, though.
Hmm.
They were operating in total secrecy, out on the fringe, brewing up something incredibly potent. Kelly Johnson, the chief engineer, basically put up a keep-out sign and explicitly told corporate management to leave them alone.
And the speed, looking at the data here, it's almost unbelievable by modern procurement standards. Let's look at the XP-80 Shooting Star.
The first jet fighter for the U.S. Army Air Forces.
Right. Kelly Johnson and his team designed and built the prototype in 143 days.
Just let that number sit for a second.
143 days. That is less than 5 months to invent a jet fighter from scratch.
And this data point completely explains the company's internal mythos. They deeply believe they can do the impossible, because at one point they actually did. They built a jet fighter faster than most companies today can launch a software update.
And they didn't stop there.
Let's trace the Cold War assets that came out of this shop. The U-2,
The Dragon Lady.
designed to fly at 70,000 feet, which in the 1950s was basically space.
It was what aerodynamicists call the coffin corner. The air is so thin up there that if you fly just a few knots too slow, you stall and fall out of the sky.
And if you fly a few knots too fast,
The structural stress rips the wings off. The pilots were balancing on a microscopic knife edge for hours at a time
and why? To see the Soviets.
because it was untouchable. They engineered a plane that could fly so high that Soviet radar couldn't track it, and their surface-to-air missiles physically couldn't reach it.
And when the missiles eventually could reach it, they built the SR-71 Blackbird, Mach 3.2, operating altitude of 100,000 feet.
I was reading the manual on this. If a missile was fired at a Blackbird, the standard evasive procedure wasn't to turn or drop flares. It was just speed up.
That's it. You literally just push the throttle forward and outrun the explosion because you are flying faster than a bullet.
See, The logic here is absolutely crucial for our investigation. These weren't just fast planes, they were immunity tickets.
Right. Think about the leverage. If you are the company that builds the only thing that can see the Soviets, or the only thing that can outrun an interceptor missile, you are no longer just a vendor.
You're indispensable.
You are a critical part of the national survival strategy. You literally cannot be allowed to fail.
But, and here is where we hit the massive rug pull in the files. While the Skunk Works was building these absolute miracles in the dark, the main corporate body was trying to step back into the light. They hadn't fully learned the lesson of the state guarantee yet. They wanted to conquer the commercial market again.
And this leads us directly to the crime scene.
The late 60s, early 70s, the L-1011 TriStar.
The body in the room.
Let's lay out the evidence here. The company decides we are going to go head-to-head with Boeing and McDonnell Douglas. They want a massive piece of the wide-body airliner market.
It's the golden age of commercial travel, and they decide to bet the entire farm on it. Look at the sunk costs. The money they spent just developing the TriStar before selling a single unit.
Between $800 million and $900 million.
Nearly $1 billion in late 1960s money.
That is a staggering amount of chips to push into the middle of the table.
It was reckless. Now, the plane itself, it was an absolute marvel. It was technologically brilliant.
Pilots loved it.
Oh, they adored it. It had an autopilot system that could land the plane in zero visibility.
So why do we call it a crime scene?
Because the business architecture was fundamentally flawed from day one. They relied on a sole engine supplier, Rolls-Royce.
Which sounds very prestigious.
Very prestigious and very quickly very broke. In 1971, Rolls-Royce goes into state receivership. They go bankrupt. The supply chain instantly snaps.
So you have a billion-dollar commercial plane sitting on the tarmac with a gaping hole where the engines should be.
And this immediately plunges the company into a fatal liquidity crisis. They're bleeding cash daily. Their net worth drops to $235 million. They're staring at total insolvency.
This brings us to the forensic accounting part of the file, because I'm reading a quote here from the CEO at the time, Daniel Houghton, and it feels like utter delusion.
It is classic executive denial. He's testifying before Congress, fighting for the company's life, and he actually says, I don't know why everyone thinks that Lockheed is managed so bad.
Because the numbers prove it.
Exactly. And this is where we uncover the lie, or at least the massive distortion of reality that management was feeding everyone. They claimed the break-even point for the TriStar was around 195 to 205 planes.
Meaning if they sold 200 planes, they'd make their $1 billion back.
Right. But look at the forensic analysis in the file. Look at the discounted cash flow.
I see it.
If you run a real discounted cash flow analysis, taking into account the crushing interest on that massive debt, the time value of money, and aiming for even a modest 10 to 13% return, the true break-even point wasn't 200 units. It was over 400 units.
400 planes. Was there even a commercial market for 400 wide-body planes at that time?
No, that's the fatal flaw. Boeing and McDonnell Douglas already held the vast majority of the market. Mathematically, selling 400 TriStars was physically impossible. The total addressable market simply wasn't there.
Wait, so the executives likely knew the commercial program was a dead end?
It is highly, highly probable. The math was right in front of them.
But they kept spending anyway.
Because they couldn't afford to stop. It's the ultimate sunk cost fallacy on a billion-dollar scale. If they stopped, they had to admit they burned $1 billion.
Until they violently hit the wall. 1971, the bailout.
The near-death moment. They go to the U.S. government completely hat in hand and ask for a loan guarantee. $250 million.
Basically telling the government, co-sign this loan or we cease to exist.
And we have to remember, this wasn't a slam dunk. The public hated the idea.
It went to a vote in the House of Representatives. Let me pull up the roll call data.
Read the final tally.
192 to 189.
3 votes.
They survived by 3 votes.
If literally 2 congressmen had changed their minds that morning, the company we are talking about today would not exist. It would have been liquidated just like the garage in 1921.
That is terrifyingly close.
And notice the exact argument they used to win those 3 crucial votes. It wasn't about innovation. It wasn't save us because we have the skunk works and the best tech.
It was jobs.
60,000 jobs were on the line.
They argued they were too big to fail.
Decades before banks used that term.
Yeah.
But here is the massive psychological takeaway. The scar tissue that completely defines the 2026 entity we are investigating today. This moment traumatized them.
Commercial competition, the free market almost killed them.
It was brutal, unpredictable, and entirely unforgiving. A single supplier in England can go bankrupt and destroy your entire empire in California.
But the government saved them.
Exactly. So the lesson they internalized was, the free market is lethal, the state is safe. They would never, ever truly risk the open market again.
From 1971 onward, the trajectory is completely set. They are going to build a fortress where the walls are made entirely of government contracts.
Which brings us perfectly to the 1990s, the consolidation phase.
Or, as the industry history books ominously call it, the Last Supper.
It sounds like a mafia meeting.
Yeah.
And for the defense industry, it basically was.
Let's set the scene here. It's 1993. The Cold War is officially over. The Soviet Union has collapsed.
Peace has broken out again, just like 1921.
And history repeats itself. Peace is terrible for business.
It's an existential threat. Defense spending is rapidly dropping to 3% of GDP. So the Deputy Secretary of Defense, William Perry, calls the heads of all the major defense contractors to a private dinner, the Last Supper.
And the message was pretty blunt, right?
Consolidate or die. He looked around the table and told them there simply wasn't enough money in the budget to keep all of them alive. We don't need 6 bomber companies anymore. We need 2. Figure it out among yourselves.
And they listened.
They didn't just listen. They became the apex predator of the consolidation. In 1995, Lockheed officially merges with Martin Marietta.
A $10 billion transaction.
This is the birth of the massive corporate entity we know today.
And this introduces a new key character in our file, Norman Augustine, the CEO of the newly merged behemoth.
Augustine was a brilliantly ruthless operator. If you read his 1995 annual report letter, it is chilling in its mechanical efficiency.
I have it here. He projects an annual savings of $1.8 billion by 1999.
Now, we need to translate corporate speak. What does $1.8 billion in savings actually mean on the ground?
It means firing people.
It means massive layoffs, closing entire manufacturing plants.
Synergy weaponized against the workforce.
Exactly. They violently stripped out any redundancy. But they didn't just shrink their footprint. They immediately weaponized their new balance sheet and expanded their reach.
The acquisition spree.
April 1996. Just months after the merger, they buy Laurel for $9.1 billion.
Now, digging into Laurel, this wasn't just another company bending metal to make airplanes.
No. Laurel was pure defense electronics. Sensors, radar, systems integration.
Wait, I see the pattern here. They are buying up the entire supply chain.
They realize that the future isn't just building the metal shell of a fighter jet. The real money is in the brains of the jet, the electronics. They're positioning themselves to become the ultimate system integrator.
They're becoming the infrastructure itself. If the government wants to build any complex weapon system, they eventually have to go through them.
They become the unavoidable gatekeeper.
So by the late 90s, they have consolidated, they have stripped out the fat, they own the critical supply chain. Now they just need the catalyst. They need the contract to end all contracts.
The monopsony capture.
October 2001, the Joint Strike Fighter competition.
This is the absolute contract of the century. It's a brutal head-to-head competition between Boeing's X-32 and their X-35. Winner essentially takes the entire future of Western tactical aviation.
And on October 26, 2001, they win it.
They secure the F-35 program.
I am looking at the press conference quote from the CEO at the time, Vance Kaufman. He stands at the podium and promises the new plane will be, quote, affordable and on schedule.
Oh, those words.
They did not age well.
They aged terribly. Let's pull up the reality versus that promise.
The data here is genuinely mind-boggling. The total life cycle cost for the F-35 program is now projected at $1.3 trillion.
Trillion. With a T.
It is the most expensive weapon system in the history of the human species.
Nothing else even comes close.
And let's look at the unit economics. An F-35B costs around $109 million just to purchase.
Just to get the keys.
Oh.
And to actually fly it.
The operating cost is currently tracking at $6.6 million per plane per year.
And what was the original target?
$4.1 million.
So they missed the target by $2.5 million per plane every single year.
Okay, let's just pause and apply some reality here. Because if we look at the commercial world, let's say Apple promised a new iPhone for $500, and it ends up costing $1,500. And the software crashes constantly. And it costs you $100 a month just to charge it.
Apple would be dead. The market would absolutely destroy them.
So why is this entity thriving? Why is their stock at $666?
Because you have to remember the lesson of 1971. In the commercial world, performance and efficiency matter. In the monopsony defense world, only survival matters.
Right.
And they engineered the F-35 program specifically to be unkillable.
How do you make a trillion-dollar plane unkillable?
You don't rely on aerodynamics, you rely on political engineering.
Political engineering. Let's dig into the supplier map in the file.
Too big to fail architecture. Trace the suppliers.
They have over 1,700 direct suppliers for this one plane.
And where are those suppliers located geographically?
Let's see, they are distributed across practically every single U.S. state.
It's entirely intentional. They distributed the manufacturing base so widely that it blankets the electoral map.
That is deeply cynical, but brilliant.
It's a survival mechanism. Think about a senator who wants to cancel the F-35 because it's massively over budget. If they vote to cancel it, they aren't just canceling a corporate contract. They are actively voting to shut down factories and fire thousands of people in their own district.
And in the districts of all their colleagues?
It essentially becomes a hostage situation.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes politically impossible to kill the program no matter how much it costs, because they wove the plane directly into the political geography of the country.
So they built a product that generates its own unstoppable gravity.
Exactly. And look at the result. 26% of their total corporate revenue now comes from this one single program.
A quarter of their income.
They aren't competing for market share anymore. They are the market.
It is a very long way from that wooden fabric garage in San Francisco.
It's an entirely different universe.
Which brings us to the physical footprint today. We need to look at the fortress.
Let's zoom in on Camden, Arkansas.
Now, when people think of massive trillion-dollar tech companies, they picture Silicon Valley, glass walls, free espresso machines, beanbag chairs.
Camden is the exact opposite of that. Camden is the Highland Industrial Park.
2.2 million square feet, 2,427 acres of heavy concrete, steel, and high security.
What exactly are they building out there?
This is the Precision Fire Center of Excellence. They are churning out HIMARS launchers, PAC-3 missile interceptors. They add batteries.
The exact systems we see dominating the global news cycle every single night.
Right. When you see a breaking news alert about a missile defense system deploying to Eastern Europe or the Pacific Theater, it almost certainly rolled out of Camden. It is a literal fortress in the heartland.
And their financial fortress is just as heavily armored. Let's go back to that 2026 status report.
The numbers are staggering when you view them through this lens.
The stock price, $666.51.
A hell of a number.
It really is. And that backlog, $194 billion of guaranteed future revenue.
But the metric that truly defines them, the one we started with, is that defense purity rating, 96%.
And to really understand how wild that is, we have to compare it to their peers.
Let's look at RTX, formerly Raytheon.
Their defense purity is 54%.
So almost half of their entire business is still tied to the commercial sector.
Right. They sell Pratt & Whitney engines to commercial airlines. They are still deeply exposed to the whims of the open market.
And what about Boeing?
Boeing's defense purity is 48%.
And look at the absolute chaos Boeing is dealing with right now.
Exactly. Doors flying off mid-flight, whistleblowers testifying, their stock taking massive hits. And why? Because they are out there fighting hand-to-hand for commercial market share. They are constantly cutting corners to compete with Airbus on pricing and delivery timelines. They are fully exposed to the chaos of the free market.
Meanwhile, our subject is sitting comfortably at 96% purity.
They are entirely calm because they successfully, completely exited the commercial world. They looked at the terrifying chaos of selling to the public in 1971, and they permanently opted out. They're the only true pure-play titan left.
So Project Blackwood is completely secure.
Impervious. The entity is generating $6.9 billion in free cash flow annually. They built an impenetrable wall between themselves and the risks that liquidated their original founders' company in 1921.
But poring over these files, I can't help but ask the what-if question.
Trace the path not taken.
Yeah. What if the L-1011 TriStar had actually worked out? What if Rolls-Royce hadn't gone bankrupt and they managed to sell 500 of those planes?
It's really fascinating to speculate. If that commercial bet had paid off, they might be locked in a brutal dogfight with Airbus today.
They'd be dealing with global travel slumps, volatile ticket prices, angry consumer complaints.
They would be a hybrid animal, just like Boeing. constantly struggling to balance the competing demands of two entirely different worlds.
But instead, when they faced the abyss, they chose the path of the sovereign guarantee.
They chose total stability. They realized that if you embed yourself deeply enough into the state, the government literally cannot afford to let you fail.
It's an incredible paradox, isn't it?
It really is.
The investigation clearly reveals that the most advanced technology company in the world
The engineers designing hypersonic glide vehicles and stealth fighter jets.
are also the ones who are most fundamentally terrified of the free market.
That is the ultimate irony of the file. They engineered a sprawling system where they can never fail, simply because the government cannot afford the consequences of their failure. They traded free market efficiency for absolute invincibility.
This has been Project Blackwood.
And going through all this data, it leaves us with one final, deeply uncomfortable question.
Is a system that values guaranteed stability over actual efficiency truly safer for us? Or have we just funded the creation of a geopolitical dinosaur that is simply too heavy to ever change direction?
That is the $1.3 trillion question.
That's something to think about.